and welcome back to the Jobless Bum YouTube channel. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, we're going to be ranking the logos of Major League Soccer, the MLS, in a tier list. We're going to see which ones look exceptional, spectacular, and which ones are just bad. So, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off our tier list, we do have Atlanta United, and I think this is a pretty good logo. I like the circle shape for a crest, even though in the MLS it may be like overrepresented. I do like the circle crest, so I think that's a positive for the Atlanta United logo. I like the colors as well. The red and the black is really cool, and then this gold is also really cool. It is a bit boring, but they could have done a lot worse with this logo, I think. And I think this is a pretty solid B tier. There's definitely better logos, I think, but it's not a bad logo by any means. Next up, we do have Austin FC, and I like this tree. It's kind of a simple logo. You just got this green tree coming through. The black, green, and white colors I think are really cool as well. It's a bit simplistic though, and it's gonna come with some negatives as well because I am a bit biased against Austin FC because their owner, Anthony Precourt, tried to move my beloved Columbus Crew from Columbus and move them to a different city, and he was given Austin FC as a consolation prize when he couldn't uproot the hardest working team in America from their rightful home. So it's probably a B tier logo, but since I do not like Austin, I will put them in the C tier. All right, next up, we do have the Chicago Fire, and this is a tough one for me because I hate the design of the logo. You got this really uninspired design in the middle. It's too simplistic for me. I do like the design of the C, and the star is a nice touch, and the colors are really good. So all of that really elevates it above where I would have put it. I would have put it in the D tier because it just does not look good design-wise, but the colors make up for it. The red, white, and blue is a really good color scheme, so I'm going to put it in the C tier. It could have been a D tier, but the color choices definitely put it in the C tier for me. Next up, we do have FC Cincinnati, and I really do like this little lion design. I think it's supposed to be a lion with the wings and the sword. I think that's a really nice touch, and I just noticed as well the tail makes a C. That's kind of cool. The colors are good too. Orange and blue is kind of a classic color scheme. At least it looks kind of similar to like the Denver Broncos or something. So I think the colors really work, and this pentagon kind of design is somewhat unique in terms of the crest shape. It's kind of similar to maybe like a DC United or a Sporting Kansas City or Toronto. Now that I look more at the rest of the logos, it's actually not that unique, but the way the lines kind of flare outward is kind of unique. I don't know. I really like this logo a lot. It's probably an A tier, but I don't know. FC Cincinnati is the rival of the Columbus Crew, so I am a bit biased here. I'll put them in the B tier. It's probably an A tier logo, but I am a bit biased, so we'll put them in the B tier. Next up, we do have Charlotte FC, and this is a really cool logo. It's got this nice crown in the middle, which is a nice touch because Charlotte is the Queen City. You got this nice, I don't know exactly what it is. It's kind of like a powder blue, but a little bit darker. And this black as well is a nod to the Carolina Panthers, who is the NFL team in Charlotte. So I like that bit of synergy there. It is a bit simplistic, but this crown is a really good design, I think. I'm probably gonna put this in the A tier. I think it's a really good logo. It's really cool. They got a nice nod to the city as well. So I'm gonna put it in the A tier. Next up, we do have the Colorado Rapids, and I think this is supposed to be a mountain down here, or perhaps it's the water from a rapid. In any case, it is a bit simplistic for me, but I think it actually is a mountain. So I do like the mountain design, and you got a nice little soccer ball in there. I don't like the font. I think the font is kind of, I don't know, it's just not doing it for me. But what especially is not doing it for me is this maroon and sky blue color combination. I know it's a classic combination in bloody old England with their soccer teams, because I can think of at least least 3 teams just off of the top of my head, like Aston Villa, Burnley, Scunthorpe, who all use that color scheme. And it's just, I think it's very ugly. So this is going to be our first entrant in the D tier. I think it's really bad. Next up, we do have my hometown team, the Columbus Crew. And this logo is really bad, especially compared to the previous 2 logos that the Columbus Crew had. The first being the Hard Hat Men, which was a bit amateur looking, but really fit the city of Columbus, as in like a blue collar Midwestern city. And then they changed that to a more sophisticated logo that had a little checkerboard and stripes, and it looked more European, more refined, but it still had a little bit of charm in it as well. This, I don't know what they're trying to do with this. It's just like a banner. This C looks really weird because they had to fit it within the constraints of the banner, so it's not symmetrical, and it just looks really weird. I do like the little 96 for when the club was founded. That adds a little bit to it. It looked really weird before they put this in, because originally they didn't have this 96 in the corner. It was just blank space, so it really felt empty and felt very weird. So I think that improved it a little bit, but I still think this is a really bad logo. And this is how bad the logo is. Usually I adjust the rankings for bias and stuff, but even with bias, I still think this is a really bad logo. I'm gonna put it in the D tier. I don't know what they were thinking when they changed the logo to this. This is just awful. All right, next up we do have FC Dallas, and I really like this logo. I think this is really cool. You got this red, white, and blue color scheme, which is very nice, and American as well. And it does a nod to the Texas flag as well, because you got this blue, this white, and then this red. So I think that's all really cool. You got a nice longhorn, which Texas is known for their cattle industry. So I think this is a really cool logo. I think this is going to be our first entrant in the S tier. I think this is a really good logo. Next up, we do have DC United, and I like this simplicity of the logo. The black and the red is a good color scheme, I think. I think it really works well. This eagle is really cool in the middle of the logo as well. It's very stylized, very non-realistic, but I like this as a symbol for the team, and especially so for DC United, because it is the nation's capital. The eagle is the symbol of the United States. So I do like this logo a lot. I think this is another entrant into our S tier. I think this is a very good logo, one of the best in the MLS. Next up, we do have the Houston Dynamo, and I like the design of this logo. This hexagon is really cool, kind of unique as like a base for a crest, but it's just very generic. It doesn't really like tell you anything about who the team is. The previous logo had like a white burst of energy, like a dynamo, and I thought that logo was a lot better. I recognize that this logo is probably more sophisticated, but it doesn't have any of the character that their previous logo had. So I think it's a bit generic, but it's also not like terrible. So I'm gonna put it in the C tier. It's definitely not at the level of these logos down here, but it's also not good. So I'm gonna put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have Sporting Kansas City, and it's a bit of a generic logo. I like this S and C. I think that's kind of cool. This design where it looks very fluid. I also like these stripes of this light blue coming through. It almost makes it seem like there's some movement as well, so there's some dynamism. And I like the color scheme. This light blue and this dark blue I think really work well. It reminds me of like the North Carolina Tar Heels, but it also doesn't like really like tell me anything about the team either. I feel like there's no character. I feel like this is just very generic as well. So I'm gonna put this one in the C tier. The colors really make it go from being a D tier into the C tier, but it's just very generic, very bland. And I feel like a lot of these MLS logos are pretty generic as well. So we'll put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have LAFC, and This is a pretty basic logo. I think the color scheme works. I think it's pretty cool. And like, especially on like uniforms, I think it's really cool because the gold is like a little bit more metallic, I think. But I think this is really cool. And I like the little addition of the angel wing to the A, referencing Los Angeles, the Angel City. So I always like those little references to the city, make them more unique than just say like, oh, like this is what the logo is. Connecting to your city, I think, improves the logo. So I'm gonna put this in the B tier. I think it's a pretty solid logo, and I think it would have been a C tier without this little angel wing, but I really like that. I think that's a nice touch. Next up, we do have the LA Galaxy, and it's a pretty basic logo, pretty standard. This dark blue and this yellow is, I think, a good color scheme. You do got this nice star representing like the concept of the galaxy. I think there's a lot more you could have done with the galaxy as like a concept for a logo. I think there's a lot of potential, a lot of ways you could rework this logo to become something that's very unique and very cool. But as it stands right now, I think this is a pretty solid logo. It's going with their rivals LAFC into the B tier. I think it's a pretty solid logo, and it's better than the ones in the C or the D tier, so B tier it is. Next up, we do have Inter Miami, and this is a really cool logo. I think this black and pink color scheme is really cool. It's very unique for sports, in my opinion. I can't think of like a sports team that has black and pink as their colors. I like these little flamingos in the center of it. It screams Miami, you know, this tropical vibe. Also, the flamingos is kind of like this cheap fanciness that I feel like Miami is known for. So this is a really good representation of what Miami is. And I think this is another S tier logo. I think this is a really cool logo. I really like this one a lot. Next up, we do have Minnesota United. And I like this loon, I think, is the bird specifically in the logo. I think that's a really cool bird. And it contrasts with the lighter colors in the background of the logo as well. So I think that's pretty cool. I think it is a bit basic. So I think this is going to be an A tier logo. I really like it a lot, but you definitely could improve it. And also this little star at the top. I don't know if Minnesota has ever won a championship, maybe in like the lower division. So I don't know if they have earned that star on their logo. I think it's a really solid logo. We're going to put it in the A tier. Next up, we do have CF Montreal, and this is a mess of a logo. You got like this weird kind of configuration in the middle. I don't know exactly what they're trying to go for here. It does look a bit generic, I will say, and especially compared to their previous logo. It had like a little French cross in there referencing the French heritage of Montreal and Quebec. So I think their previous logo was miles better than this one, but still all right. It's pretty cool, but I think the previous logo was better. I'm gonna put this one in the B tier. It's not like offensively bad like some of these other ones, but it's also not as good as some of the logos in the upper tier. So I think it's right smack dab in the middle of the pack. Next up, we do have the New England Revolution, and this is a marked improvement over their previous logo. Their old logo was really bad. It screamed MLS 1.0. It was not very good, but this logo is pretty sophisticated. It looks classic, I will say, which Boston is a pretty classic city, so harkening back to a classic look, I think really works, and I think it just really looks cool. I think it perhaps is a bit too simplistic. I'm sure there's some things that you probably could have added to it to put it into the S tier, but I think it's a really good logo, one of the best in the MLS, so we'll put it in the A tier. I think there's probably a little bit more that could have been done to improve it, but it's a really good logo. Next up, we do have Nashville SC, and this is just so basic, so generic. I don't even know what they're going for. You got this little N and yellow. I think that it's supposed to be like a blue. I think the color scheme is pretty good, but it's just basic. The octagon, I guess, is unique as a base for the crest, but overall, I think it's really bad logo. I'm going to put it in the D tier. Next up, we do have New York City FC, and it's an all right logo. You got this cool little interlocking NYC in the middle. I think it looks classic. Like, this looks like a logo that's been around for 40 years, even though the team has only been around for like 6 or 7 years. I think it's good in that respect. I like this color scheme of the dark blue and the light blue, like the Sporting Kansas City logo. I think this is probably an A-tier logo. I think perhaps adding some more New York landmarks could make this logo better, but I think it's a really good logo as is, and I think it's definitely an A-tier logo, so I think it's a good logo. Next up, we do have the New York Red Bulls, and by default, I'm going to put it in the D tier. I'm just opposed to having sponsored teams, as I'm opposed to having teams that basically just serve as advertisement for some other brand. You know, I think a logo should speak to the city that they're from, the community, the fans, and this does none of that. Aesthetically, I think it looks pretty good, but just by principle, I don't think I can have it anywhere other than the D tier. Next up, we do have Orlando City, and I really like this lion in the middle of the logo with the sun kind of mane coming out from it. And this purple and light gold color combination I think is really cool too. It is a bit simple, but in this case, the lion is so recognizable that if you added more complexity to it, I'm not sure that it would make for a better logo. I think perhaps you could add some more features to the logo, perhaps, to make it better. But as is, I think it's a really good logo. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think it's really cool and is definitely one of the better logos in the MLS. Next up, we do have the Philadelphia Union, and this is a really cool logo. This blue and gold color combination I think is really good, and this little snake in the middle of the logo referencing the idea of don't tread on me. I think it's called the Gadsden flag. I think that's a really cool touch, especially since Philadelphia is a city that has a lot of significance to America's colonial past as a kind of catalyst for the American Revolution. I think Philadelphia was where the Declaration of Independence was signed. So I think that's a really cool touch as well, tying it back to the city and the name of the team as well, the Philadelphia Union. So I think this logo is a definite S tier. This might be the best logo in the MLS in my opinion. I think it's really good and definitely deserves to be in the S tier. Next up, we do have the Portland Timbers, and this axe in the middle of the logo is really cool. And I like the green and gold color scheme. Portland and Oregon in general is known for the forests that cover the state, and I think they have a pretty big logging industry, so referencing that I think is really cool in the logo. I think it's just a bit too simple for me. I'm gonna put it in the A tier. I think it's a really solid logo, and there is perhaps some improvements that could be done to put it in this S tier, but I think it's a really solid A tier logo. Next up, we do have Real Salt Lake, and this is just a very generic logo for a very generic team, taking Real, which was used to distinguish Spanish teams that have some sort of relationship with the royal family of Spain. So I think that's really tacky, but the logo itself is kind of cool. It's kind of harkens back to those kind of Spanish logos of like Real Madrid, Real Sociedad, amongst other teams that are Real in nature. I think it's probably just above the D tier because it's just a very solid logo. So I can't put it in the D tier, but I'm going to put it in the C tier. It's not much better than the D tier, but it's a solid concept and design, so we'll put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have the Seattle Sounders, and I really like this logo a lot. This design of the structure of the crest is really cool. You got this little kind of pentagon shape and then like another shape as well, and the Seattle Sounders coming across. I think that's really cool. The blue and the green is a very unique color scheme that I enjoy a lot. And you got a reference to the city itself with the Space Needle in the logo as well. I think this is a definite S tier for me. Really good logo and an example of what a good logo should be, and one of the best logos in the MLS. So fair play, Seattle. Next up, we do have the San Jose Earthquakes, and this one is really bad. Very generic. Nothing really distinguishing this team from nothing that really screams San Jose Earthquakes besides the fact that they put Quakes in the logo. So I think it also just looks ugly too. So I think this is a pretty easy D tier for me. It's not very good. San Jose, do better. Come on. You can do better than this. This is a bad logo. Next up, we do have Toronto FC, and this is just another generic logo. I don't know that it's really screaming Toronto to me. I do like the colors. The red and this dark gray and this white are pretty cool. It makes it stand out from some of the other teams. I think the color scheme is good. And you got this nice T in there. It's a alright logo. It's solid. We'll put it in the B tier. Last up, we do have the Vancouver Whitecaps, and a white cap being a wave in the ocean, which Vancouver is next to the ocean, so fitting name. And you got the white cap of the wave coming up, and then you got the nice blue water below. So a nice abstract representation of the concept of the logo. The diamond as well is pretty cool, kind of unique amongst the MLS logos. I think it's a bit too simple for me. I think there's some improvements that you probably could do, and it feels a little busy in the middle, to be honest. So I think this is another solid logo. I'm gonna put it in the B tier. I think you could definitely make some improvements to this, but it's a solid logo as is. I don't think there's really too much you need to change about this to make this a good logo. I'm gonna give you one final chance to take a look at our completed MLS logos tier list. Thank you so much for watching our MLS logos tier list video. Let me know in the comments what your favorite MLS logo is and what you thought of the tier list. I'd be curious to know. Again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to stay safe.